You ever get that feeling like we're all stuck playing a game, but someone else wrote the rules? And worse, those rules were never meant for us to win. That's what tariffs are, or rather, that's what tariffs have become. A symbol of how upside down our economic system really is. Now, stick with me, because I know tariffs might sound boring, but if you care about your paycheck, your cost of living, or whether your kids will be able to own a home, this is going to hit home. So let's set the stage. We were sold a lie. Back in the 80s and 90s, we were told free trade will lift all boats. NAFTA, WTO, permanent normal trade with China all pitched us as win-wins. They told us tariffs were outdated, protectionist, nationalist, bad for growth. And on the surface, it made sense. If other countries can produce things cheaper, why not buy from them? Let Americans move up the value chain, right? So we opened the gates. We dropped tariffs, we signed deals, we outsourced, and we called it progress. But here's what really happened. The asymmetry. While we were playing by the free trade playbook, everyone else was gaming the system. Let's talk numbers. Canada has a 258% tariff on U.S. dairy. 258. Mexico runs a $177 billion trade surplus with the United States. China, try $300 billion. The EU, roughly $200 billion. Now, ask yourself this. If free trade is supposed to be fair, why are we the only ones playing with no armor? Our tariffs, in most cases, single digits, sometimes even zero. We don't just allow it, we actually defend it. Our politicians call it diplomacy. Our media calls it global leadership. But it's not leadership if it bankrupts your people. Tariffs are not the enemy. So let's flip the script. Tariffs aren't the villain here. They're a tool. And like many tools, they depend on how you use them. When Trump came in and said, you tariff us 200%, we'll tariff you 200%, the world freaked out. The media lost its mind. Economists warned of doom. But what actually happened? Foreign investments went up. Manufacturing started coming back. And companies that had been coasting on unfair deals suddenly had to think twice. See, your tariffs aren't punishment, they're leverage. They're the one thing we haven't been willing to use because we've been afraid to upset the status quo. Let me tell you a story. There's a peach farmer in Modesto I know. He's third-generation grower. He worked the land, built a life, put his kids through college. But over time, cheap canned peaches from China started flooding the market. Subsidized, tariff-protected, dirt cheap. You can't grow, pick, and can and ship peaches in California for what it costs to do all of that in China and put it on a boat. So what happened? That farmer, he lost his land. He had to sell the equipment. Now he's working part-time in a warehouse outside of Stockton. Meanwhile, some bureaucrat in Brussels or Beijing is collecting a subsidy, and they call it progress. Where's the justice in that? Look at the bigger picture. We're $36 trillion in debt. We borrow $3 billion a day just to pay interest. And the same countries that profit from our open markets, well, they're the ones we borrow from. It's like someone robbing your house, then offering to lend you the money to fix the door at 6.5% interest. That's the insanity of our system. And you know who pays for it? You, me, everyone to raise a family and build a future. This is where Davis Hanson said we're in a counterrevolution, not with muskets, but with policy. Tariffs, energy independence, border control, foreign investment, these aren't fringe ideas. They're what a country does when it's serious about survival. And let's be clear, we're not trying to start trade wars. We're trying to end decades-long surrender. This is a psychological game. You know what the real tariff is? The psychological one. We've been trained to think we don't have a right to push back. We've been told that if we defend our own interests, we're isolationist. That if we want fair deals, we're nationalist. That if we dare to say, hey, maybe 258% tariffs on our dairy isn't cool, we're the problem. No, we're just waking up. You know what the ultimate irony is? We didn't just open the global markets, we built them. Let's go back in time. Post-World War II, Europe is in ruins. Japan is devastated. Germany flattened. And what did we do? We didn't kick them while they were down. We wrote the Marshall Plan. We sent billions of dollars in aid. We shipped steel, concrete, food, machinery. We helped rebuild German industry. We helped stabilize Japan. We said, let's not make the mistakes of World War I. Let's not punish, let's build. We created our future competitors on purpose, and at that time, that was noble. It was the right thing to do. We believed that peace through prosperity was another way to prevent another world war. But here's the part no one talks about. We forgot to put a clock on the deal. You give someone a leg up, that's generosity. But when you use that leg to kick you in the teeth 40 years later, well, that's a grift. Germany today runs massive trade surpluses. Japan too. China's taken it to a whole different level. But guess what? They all got their start with our help and our open markets. We absorbed their exports, we subsidized their security through NATO and military protection. And in exchange, we lost our manufacturing base. We built the house. They moved in. And they changed the locks. Here's something wild, and few people remember this. During World War II, there was a proposed U.S. plan called the Morgenthau Plan. The idea? Cripple Germany permanently, strip it to its industrial base, turn it into an agrarian state, import labor to ensure it never rose to a military strength again. It was harsh, arguably extreme. But here's the kicker. Germany did it to itself voluntarily 70 years later. They opened their borders, they dismantled their energy grid in the name of green policy, they created a dependency on Russian gas. Now, they're running trade surpluses while we foot the bill for NATO, defense, and energy innovation. We didn't have to execute the Morgenthau Plan. They walked into it themselves. And yet, we're still the ones carrying the burden. Friendship without reciprocity is not friendship. Now let me ask you something. If you protected a friend for decades, let them sell to your customers, and then when the bills came, they said, hey man, that's your problem, would you still call them a friend? Because that's exactly what happened. We've been Uncle Sam, global protector, global market, global bank. But when we say, hey, maybe pay your fair share, we're the bad guys. That's the psychological tariff. That's the price we pay for being too polite. And this is where tariffs come in. Tariffs say, you want access to our market? Then make it fair. It's not war. It's not hate. It's just business. If Germany wants to sell BMWs here, great, but let Ford sell cars there at the same rate. If Canada wants to sell us dairy, fantastic, but drop your 258% tariff or we raise ours. This isn't radical. This is how every other country operates. We're the suckers, and we're told to smile while we get taken. You hear the term globalism and it sounds fair, right? Open borders, free markets, win-win. But globalism doesn't mean equal. It meant the United States opens up, the rest of the world takes advantage. It meant our jobs leave, our products get undercut, and our allies pretend we're too powerful to complain. Let me be blunt, there is no global order without the US. And there is no fairness in a game where the referee plays for the other team. How did we get here? We got here because we bought the lie. We believed economists who never ran a business. We believed politicians who never signed a paycheck. We believed that being generous made us moral. But here's what I've learned. Generosity without boundaries leads to abuse, and that's what happened. We created the world's strongest economy, then let it be siphoned off bit by bit under the banner of global trade. And every time we raise a hand to say, hey, this doesn't seem fair, we're called xenophobic or fascist or protectionist. No, I think we're just awake. I'm not saying we should shut ourselves off. I am saying fair trade doesn't mean we give and they take. It means we both give and we both gain. If the Marshall Plan was about rebuilding the world, then maybe it's time for a Main Street Plan, one that rebuilds us. And it starts with tariffs, smart ones, targeted ones that finally say, thanks for the memories, now let's play fair. Here's the part that I really don't want to talk about. When you destroy your own industries, you don't just lose jobs, you lose identity. America used to be a place where if you didn't go to college, that was okay. You can go to work at the steel mill, the auto plant, the shipyard. You made things, you built, you earned a wage, and you could raise a family on your own. Today, try finding a factory in Detroit that's hiring at $35 an hour without a degree. Try raising a family working part-time at Target. We let our industrial backbone rot, and we called it progress. And it wasn't just jobs, it was neighborhoods. When the diner closes, the barber leaves, the Little League coach moves to another town, drugs creep in, despair sets in. That's not theory, that's Youngstown. That's Fresno, that's Toledo. Places where Americans dreamed, places where the American dream was alive until globalism pulled the rug out. Beyond But nobody on Wall Street or in Brussels loses sleep over that because the spreadsheet looks great. They see GDP up, but they don't see the kid whose dad hasn't worked in 3 years. They see stock prices rising, but they don't walk past the boarded up Main Street where half the stores are closed. You want to talk inequality? We'll start there. Look at this map. On the coast, New York, San Francisco, DC, money's flowing like water. But drive 30 minutes inland, whole towns look like they got left in a different century. We became a country of two economies, one for people who benefit from global trade on the coasts, and one for people who pay for it on the interior. Tariffs aren't about revenge. They're about rebuilding that second America, the one that's been ignored for over 30 years. So why is there so much resistance to tariffs? Simple, because the people who benefit from the current system don't want it to end. And they control the media, the universities, the think tanks, and most of the government bureaucracy. You ever wonder why there's such a strong emotional reaction when someone even mentions tariffs? It's not about economics, it's about control. Tariffs threaten the game. They shift power back to the American worker, to the manufacturer, to the people who actually make things. And that terrifies the laptop class. That's why, like Victor Davis Hanson said, counterrevolution, not with protests, but with policy. Trump wasn't supposed to happen. He was the glitch in the matrix. He talked about trade deficits, tariffs, manufacturing, and national sovereignty. Things no politician had touched since Ross Perot, and it worked. The base grew, the map changed. But it wasn't about Trump. It was about something deeper, a hunger for fairness, for reciprocity. People finally saw it. Globalism isn't just unfair, it's unsustainable. First tool to hit the reset button. Let me break the fourth wall down for a second. You know what's funny? Even if you think you're against tariffs, you're already paying them. You pay it when a factory job is replaced by a part-time gig. You pay it when your rent goes up, but your wage doesn't. You pay it when cheap foreign goods flood the market and your local businesses close. The only difference is those aren't official tariffs. They're invisible, they're silent, but they hit your wallet just the same. Tariffs aren't about punishing others. They're about making the cost visible and reclaiming some control. I'll say this straight. We deserve to be selfish again. Not in a mean way, not in an isolationist way, but in a balanced way. Every other country negotiates on its terms. They protect their workers, they defend their markets, and no one calls them names. Why are we the only ones expected to bend over and smile? Why are we the only ones afraid to say, hey, we matter too? This isn't just about economics. It's about sovereignty and it's about dignity. We're not a dumping ground. We are not a bank. We're not a doormat. So what do? Well, we stop apologizing. We set smart, targeted tariffs based on actual disparities. If China taxes our goods at 15%, well, we match it. If Canada blocks our milk, well, we block theirs. If Mexico undercuts us with near zero labor costs, we make it hurt to cheat. We invest at home. We reward companies that manufacture here. We make it easier to build, not harder. And we remind the world, you don't get to grow on our backs while we sink. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine an America where we build things again, where we forge steel in Pittsburgh, where Detroit isn't a punchline, where Bakersfield and Buffalo are booming again, where a teenager graduates high school and says, I'm going to the factory because that job pays $80,000 a year with benefits. Not everyone wants to code. Not everyone wants to be an influencer. Some people want to build, to shape, to create, and they should be honored, not pitied. We used to believe that. We used to live that. And tariffs are one way back. Now, some people are going to say, come on, Ramin, we can't go back. That era's over. But here's the truth. It's not about going back. It's about going forward with wisdom. We learned what happens when you offshore. We learned what happens when you let China make your antibiotics and Germany sell you solar panels while they run Russian gas. We learned that you can't outsource resilience. And if we don't use tariffs, if we don't rebuild that industrial base while we still have the know-how, then what are we? A country that scrolls? A country that consumes but doesn't create? It's not America. We've done this before. During World War II, the War Production Board didn't ask permission. They didn't hold panels. They didn't call McKinsey. They handed the keys to American industry. Ford, Kaiser, Lockheed, build like hell, they said. And we did. We made more tanks, more ships, more planes than the world had ever seen. Not because we were lucky, because we had capacity. Tariffs aren't the entire solution. but they give us time and leverage to rebuild that capacity. We're not trying to dominate the world. We're trying to defend our own house. So what does fair actually look like? Well, it looks like a two-way street. If Germany wants to sell us BMWs, fine, but let Ford sell there without 10 layers of bureaucracy and taxes. If Canada wants to export maple syrup and milk, no problem, but drop the 258% tariffs on ours. If Mexico wants to send us goods assembled by Chinese parts at near zero wages, they need to understand they're paying for that privilege now. This is not punishment. This is reciprocity. The rules should be the same for everyone. That's all we're asking. Let me say something that's almost spiritual. There's a kind of dignity that comes from making something with your own hands, from building a product from start to finish, from walking out of work covered in sweat, but knowing you did something real. We've lost that. We've told a whole generation, go to college or you're nothing. Meanwhile, welders, machinists, electricians, they're disappearing. And guess what? You can't outsource your grid. You can't Uber your plumbing. You can't TikTok a tractor engine. We need people who make. Tariffs help create space for that again. They allow American workers to compete, not get crushed by slave wages and currency manipulation. The elites don't want you to hear this. And that's why this kind of message right here, what I'm saying, gets drowned out. Because there's a class of people, media, government, academia, who've never worked in a factory, who don't know what it's like to budget a $1,500 paycheck over 4 weeks, who've never watched their hometown die because a mill closed. They live on spreadsheets, they live on assumptions, and worst of all, they live without consequence. If you're wrong in Washington, well, you got a book deal. If you're wrong in Youngstown, you lose your home. That's the difference. And tariffs threaten that Ivy Tower. They forced reality back into the room. Oh yeah, and let's talk about the other lie. Tariffs will make everything more expensive. Let me ask you something. What's the price of cheap? When your town disappears, when your son gets hooked on fentanyl from a supply chain we don't control, when we borrow $3 billion a day just to keep the lights on, that's not cheap. That's expensive with interest. Tariffs might make a few things cost more up front, but they buy us back out of the future, and that is worth more than any discount at Walmart. It's time to stop being afraid. We've been scared for too long, scared of offending our allies, scared of rocking the boat, scared of being called names. But I'm not scared anymore. And I don't think you are either. This is our country. These are our workers. This is our dignity. And if we don't fight for it, no one else will. So here's what I'm saying. Tariffs aren't radical. They're really common sense. They're not about hate. They're about home. They're not about isolation. They're about respect for our labor, our economy, and our people. We've done more for the world than any country in history. We rebuilt Germany. We protected Japan. We let China into the WTO. We gave NATO its backbone. And now we're the bad guy. Because we want fairness? Nope, not anymore. This is the great American rebalancing. It's long overdue. And if that offends the global elite, well, that is what it is. Because for the first time in a long time, we're choosing us. Thanks for sticking with me. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Agree, disagree, let's talk. But just remember, fair trade isn't selfish, it's survival.